Chem Champion, how are you?
I'm doing all right. But maybe for this conversation, it'll be Dr. Champion.
Dr. Champion.
I know how much you don't. Well, PhD. But I know you don't want to have the conversation, but I wanted to give you a rational, non-argumentative argument against labeling for GMO foods. Okay. So first, I don't get any bizarre sexual gratification out of having GMOs in my food. I was doorbelling for Bernie last week. I'm not a Monsanto employee. This is just where I'm coming from.
Okay.
So I agree with you that it's a public policy decision that I'm not arguing with. It's just whether it's a good public policy decision.
Right.
And you cited labeling the foods for where they come. When I was looking this up, like 92% of people want to support local farmers, so that's why the public and their elected representatives required that. But also in the polling, you find a poll from a few months ago from ABC News that finds that 52% of people believe that GMO foods are unsafe. Republicans are evenly divided.
Okay.
Whether,
all right. Let me just hustle you to the point. Why?
Okay.
Let me set it up this way. Okay. Let me set it up this way. If we're going to engage in this, people tell me that my desire to have labeling is equivalent to denying of climate change. Okay, science. Okay. The construction of the climate science, if I understand it, is this. 95%, 98% of the world scientists, right? And I think we can agree there's a lot more people and a lot more disinterested people who have been working on climate science than GMO. Let's just put that aside, okay? Let's just pretend it's the same.
Sure.
Let's just pretend it's the same, that it's not, we have the same force of science in terms of like peer-reviewed studies and whatnot, which I think even GMO proponents would argue it's not the same, but put that aside. The argument about climate change is this, is that you have 95%, 98% agreement that climate change is man-made, okay? And if you went to your doctor and your doctor said, you have a 95% chance of getting cancer, would you act in that situation? In other words, the cost, maybe there's a 5% chance of that there is no climate change, but the cost of doing nothing is so great and so disastrous and impossible to return from, right? If we go 20 more years into the future without doing anything, there's no way to make up that time. It's so great that it would not make sense to move forward. In my mind, when it comes to GMOs, if you're telling me that we should not label, now you can tell me the reasons why we would label are wrong and whatnot, but it is incumbent upon you as an anti-labeling advocate to explain to me why, if there are labels talking about, indicating that something is GMO, that the outcome could be so disastrous that we cannot return from it. You need to make that argument to me if you're going to make the equivalent of being a climate change denier or some type of science denier, because there is no way you can come to me and say that there's anything more than 95% chance, and I don't even know if you could say 95% chance, but I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. There's a 95% chance that GMOs have no negative impact whatsoever. Well, you also got to make the argument that the downsides to labeling are so acute that it's going to have some type of lasting, disastrous implications. And so I'm waiting for someone to tell me that. Tell me what the implications are, not whether or not you think the reasons for doing it are wrong, but the implications of labeling are so dangerous. In what way?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're so dangerous. I don't think that
Do you think they're dangerous at all? I mean, tell me,
GMOs.
what's the downside of labeling? Not
Okay.
the reasons
Okay.
to do it are
Okay.
wrong, but the downside.
The downside is that, you may be coming at this from a rational place, but the majority of people who have a problem with GMOs, and this is verified by polls, are coming from a ridiculous,
Okay, well, don't argue with them because you're
unscientific
arguing.
place.
I'm asking you to tell me, not them, to tell me what is the downside. We put the labels on there. It says GMO. Now tell me what the great downside is.
Okay, well, GMO foods or organisms do have some problems with monoculture, superweed, things like that. But they also have a lot of benefits. There's 3 different kinds of...
I'm not arguing about GMOs. I'm talking about labeling. Listen, a climate denier can at least say, a climate denier can say, look, you say there's only a 95% chance that the world is warming. And I am telling you that if we go down the path that you want, Sam Seder, we're going to we're going to economically disadvantage ourselves. You're going to cause deprivation. You're going to ruin the U.S. economy for no reason. We're going to become, we're going to become slaves of China, whatever they can come up with. But I want you to tell me, what are the downsides of labeling? Not why it's wrong to do it. I want to know what the risks are, because we're making a public policy argument.
Okay. Well, as I was saying, there is the majority of people believe that it's unsafe. A New York Times poll found that 37% of people think that GMOs cause cancer. But one of the types of GMO foods, and there's 3 different kinds, are papayas. They're virus resistant. Back in the 90s, up to 80% of papaya crops were being killed off by a ring spot virus. They genetically modified papayas so that they're basically vaccinated against the virus. Now, farmers in Hawaii and the Philippines and all over are making a lot better product that isn't unhealthy, but if they were to label it, people would stop buying it because they have irrational fears that it causes cancer. That's not good for the world if we're hurting farmers and hurting the food supply just because people have irrational fears.
Okay, so let me, if I'm hearing you correctly, your argument is that 37% of the population will not buy papayas. And
well, that's one example.
Well, but wait a second. But there's a lot of assumptions in there, right, that you don't know, right? That 37% is really the papaya market. That if those 37,
over 50% they won't buy it. Over 50% they won't buy it. Over 30% per se they would cause cancer.
Okay, I understand.
That's how irrational and over the top they
I understand. See, here's the problem. Okay, here's the problem with everybody who calls in with this argument. And I know you're not doing it from a disingenuous place. You are saying we cannot give in to irrationality because we cannot give in to irrationality. And I am telling you that I don't think it's irrational for people to have a problem with the implications of GMO. And so I am saying that then you must argue, well, if we do give into irrationality, it will cause X, Y, and Z. And I don't think the papaya market cratering, even if you could prove to me that will happen, which I don't think you can. You can cite a poll that 37% of people think that genetically modified papayas cause cancer, but I don't know that they're buying papayas anyways. So, I mean,
that was one GMO. So here's another.
But that's the example you gave me.
A couple years ago.
I'm giving you a platform to make the most compelling argument you can as to the danger of labeling GMOs, and you tell me papayas. So I'll give you one more shot.
That's not so that they can sell more Roundup. That's not so that they can.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But you're not answering me. You are evading the question purposely or unpurposely. I am asking you, What are the dangers of labeling?
Okay, so here's another example. I'm listening to NPR a couple of years ago. They have this professor from Florida on. He's working on tomatoes. Tomatoes have been bred so that they stay ripe on the shelf for long periods of time. But during that processing, those decades of breeding, they've lost almost all their nutritional value. And according to him, I mean, I don't know, they taste a lot worse than they used to in the 50s and earlier. And so he's talking about doing some breeding so that he gets these heritage seeds that he found that are more nutritious and taste better, and then cross-breeding them with tomatoes that have high shelf life. And then the interviewer on NPR says, well, why don't you do genetic modification? And I'm quoting him. He goes, unfortunately, if we use genetic engineering, we could probably do this in less than half the time. But the atmosphere today with GMOs is poisonous. So that's not our intention. Okay. It's going to add several years, but we're still not going to do it.
All right. Well, I got to tell you.
Danger.
I got to tell you. So far, I have not heard a compelling case as to why we should not label, because this is what's missing. What's missing is the direct line from if you label, you will make it impossible to sell papayas or to get good tasting, minerally enriched, factory farmed, mass produced tomatoes. And I'm sorry.
These are examples.
Well, I understand, but these are the best examples you have, and they're not compelling.
Okay. Well, BT crop,
I gotta go.
Which is one of the other times.
I gotta go now. I've given you. I gotta go. I don't want to talk about this. I gave you a shot at it. We can let it sit out there. If people find it more compelling that the danger is involving papayas and tomatoes in this way, then I'm not convinced. I'm just not convinced. Because I'll tell you something. Here's the counter argument I would make. Okay, that if we allow corporations who don't want to label because they're afraid of what it will do to their technologies or their products, then we're setting a precedent that corporate interests are more important than ours. Boom. I gotta go. I'm sorry.
All right.
I mean, I get the fact that from a scientist's mind, that they don't want irrationality to drive any type of policy. But I am telling you that every policy you develop is a cost-benefit analysis. And the cost here is simply not so great. The benefit may be very tiny. The benefit just may be that people have a right to make a decision about how their food is manufactured. The benefit may be just that we make people have a greater awareness of their food supply. The benefit may be that it hurts a corporate behemoth from controlling our food supply. The benefit may be that it has some environmental implications. The benefits may be small, but the costs seem to me to also be very small. And just like I can't say to anybody, we're 100% sure that climate change is real. But when you start getting up into the 90s and the implications of it are so massive that no one would make that cost-benefit analysis. No one would make that risk analysis to bet on that. That's why that argument is compelling. But when you tell me the risk involved here is that the papaya market may crater, I'm sorry, it's just not compelling enough. So it's a false analogy between climate change.
I am never going to eat another papaya again. That's my big takeaway from that call. I had no idea that I was giving myself cancer with those things. I thought they were a lovable Caribbean fruit, and I'm literally killing myself.
Unbelievable. Honestly, I mean, that's the point, is that it's just not a compelling argument. It's just not. The cost of putting labels on there is just not so great. And if you tell me that the cost is we will not have the opportunity to develop golden rice, there's a couple of things you have to prove to me, or at least even get into the 90%. One, well, that golden rice is what it is, but let's just assume that it is. One, that by labeling stuff in the United States, we won't be able to produce golden rice in those countries where it's necessary. Two, that maybe government should just step in. I mean, I would love it if we had a 10-year period where, that it just was not profitable for private industry to go into it and just say, okay, we'll buy your patents. We'll let we'll create a World Food Bank that will buy your patents. And we're going to put a Creative Commons copyright on it or whatever it is. I mean, look, I'm sorry, the costs are just not as great.